Welcome back to the Last Days Book Club, where we're reading the book Set on Fire, with permission from the author, Taurus Montgomery, a young and successful SDA pastor with a commitment to serving the youth of this generation. The story is an autobiography of his life, where as a child, he grew up in the hood in Mobile, Alabama. In our last reading, we covered chapter 10, entitled, It Only Takes a Spark, where we learned that on the last night of the trip to Atlanta's Six Flags theme park, Taurus and Powell and 3 other kids went to the back of the hotel and lit up a blunt and indulged in some weed smoking, thinking it would remain their secret. Taurus was glad to be high again, despite the fact that he hadn't smoked for a long time. And on the bus ride back to Alabama the following day, he was on cloud 9, sitting next to his girl, Tanya. Little did he know that the bubble he was riding was about to be busted in more ways than one. While discussing with Tanya how he wanted to deepen their relationship, she dropped the bomb that she had another boyfriend whom she was seeing all the time she'd been seeing him, and basically that she was more interested in the other dude than him. His heart was broken, and he moped and wallowed in self-pity for months. But that was not all. A couple days after returning from Alabama, his mom called him and Powell in her "I am in charge" voice. Once they came to her, she beat them both with a broomstick while berating and rebuking them for disappointing her and everyone else by smoking weed on a church outing. They never figured out how she knew and who had snitched on them. They were also made to apologize to the Campbells, who only found out about the incident when they apologized. Mrs. Campbell was a wonderful lady and forgave them and assured them that she still loved them. This was a turning point in their lives, especially Powell's. He vowed that he would stop smoking completely, and they both made a vow to stop. Powell became more focused on his game and now exhibited the passion and drive that Taurus had on his return from California. His focus on God also grew greatly, and one Sabbath he responded to the pastor's appeal, went up to the front of the church to a chorus of many amens, and gave his life to Christ. He was baptized shortly afterward. While they continued their routine of traveling to school, playing ball, then waiting for their mom to pick them up at the big house, which was still under construction, something happened that opened Taurus's eyes. Powell had gone to the convenience store, and while Taurus sat there, an acquaintance from the hood passed by, smoking a blunt, and invited Powell to join him. He tried to resist with every ounce of strength he had, but he didn't. When Powell came back, Taurus tried to pretend that nothing had happened and tried to avoid his brother's eyes. But you can't hide the smell of weed. After a long silence, Powell exploded on him, expressing his great disappointment for him breaking their vow, then went on in a loud, angry voice to explain how much he loved his brother for his skill and his talent and determination to succeed and to get out of the hood. And they both broke into tears as Taurus realized how deeply his brother loved him. It was a turning point in their lives. Meanwhile, their father was doing everything he could to rebuild the big house so they could return home. The brothers helped him, and he employed Hump, an alcoholic and crack addict, to help them work on the house. Hump was a pretty good carpenter when he wasn't high or drunk, and really only worked for cigarettes and alcohol and very little money. Eventually, after 2 years, the house was finished enough for them to move back in, and now the real test began. Much had changed in their lives in the 2 years they spent at the Campbells, and now they were to return to the same hood, the same environment, the same big house, and they surely would be severely tested. Please don't forget that you can purchase this book at the author's website, taurusmontgomery.com. That's TaurusMontgomery, taurusmontgomery.com, one word. And read along with us as we pick up the story today in chapter 11, entitled Extreme Makeover. Anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone. A new life has begun. 2 Corinthians 5 verse 17, the New Living Translation. If you've ever seen the show Extreme Makeover Home Edition, I'm sure you've noticed how joyful and eager the people are when they move back into their made-over house. There is so much excitement. People are crying tears of joy. Happiness fills the air. The parents are glad. The children are in awe. You can tell by the looks on their faces that it is probably the happiest moment of their lives. Moving back into the big house was the complete opposite. There was no excitement, no tears of joy. It was not a good experience. Only Powell, Aaron, and myself returned to live with my father. With the help of Powell and me, my mother held firm this time. She refused to come back to the house because it was incomplete. It was more like patchwork than renovations. There were still burnt spots here and there. There were only 3 things that were actually brand new: the bathroom, the staircase, and the room where the fire had started. The bathroom had a new sink, new cabinets, and new tile on the floors, a new bathtub, a new toilet, a new window, and new plywood shelves. Powell's room also had some new stuff. The most obvious renovations were the new floor and the ceiling. This room had the most damage, so it received the most attention. Other than these few things, the house was pretty much the same. The roaches were there to greet us instead of Ty Pennington or Exhibit and their crew. Flying around the house was their way of showing their technological advancements since we had left. Rats and mice left their little black droppings to let us know they were still present and planned on going nowhere. It didn't matter how many mouse traps, sticky pads, or rat poison boils we laid in cracks and crevices, they still hung around. They still ate the loaves of bread and many other foods they could get into. And one night, I kid you not, I saw a rat as big and fat as a cat. That night, I skipped the midnight snack and decided to wait until breakfast. We still had the same old problems with the utilities. The electricity was still off and on. The gas was off and on. The water was off and on. These things were consistently inconsistent. I'm positive that Alabama Child Protective Services would have come and taken us away from our father had they known how we were living in that house. To this day, I don't know how we were able to get away with it for so long without anyone finding out. Nevertheless, there was one major reconstruction that was done. There was an extreme makeover. Not home edition, it was heart edition. It was the newest addition to the house that made the rest of the house a peaceful place to be. It was not an it, but a he, my brother Powell. Unlike most of the house, Powell was brand new. Everything about him was new and different. He had changed. For example, his choice of words was noticeably different. He was not speaking the same way that he was before we moved in with the Campbells. He used to regularly use a lot of four-letter words. Before, if he got upset with me about something, he would let me know it loud and clear, and with plenty offensive and obscene statements. Now, things were different. I'm sure that his constant reading improved his vocabulary and gave him better words to use. I rarely saw him without a book in his hand. And if I did, it was probably because he was sleeping. To my surprise, even his attitude about basketball was changing. It was no longer the primary career path he wanted to take. He was now talking about college in the sense of academics. His choice of entertainment had also changed. We used to watch Martin faithfully. We laughed ourselves to tears as Cedric the Entertainer, Steve Harvey, and Dave Chappelle lit up the stand-up comedy scene. To him, the content of their jokes were no longer things to be laughed at. The things that made him laugh now were not the same things that used to make him laugh. He found laughter and fun in other things, like hanging out with his church friends, attending Christian youth conventions and conferences. He refused to watch movies that had sex, violence, cursing, and drugs. It was the same with his music. This dude was the biggest No Limit Records fan in the universe. When Master P was hot, it seemed like they were dropping a new album every week. Powell knew the exact price, saved it up, and as soon as it hit the stores, he had it. We would sit next to the stereo in the Campbell's house and listen to every song, word for word. He prided himself on memorizing the songs so that we could rap it at school before anyone else knew the song. But that was over with. Now, he listened to Kirk Franklin and Yolanda Adams. He was crazy about CeCe Winans, Fred Hammond, and other gospel artists. His style of dress was new. His pants didn't sag anymore. Neither did he feel like he had to have every pair of Jordans or a new outfit for every holiday. He also had a different attitude when it came to girls. He got into a relationship with a young lady from the church. Her name was Mariah. She was a very smart girl and extremely talented. She seemed to be one of the sincerest Christian girls at the church, but she still got on my nerves. I felt like she was taking my brother away from me. Maybe I felt that way because of how much time he spent at the church in general. One thing I know is that the members of Emmanuel loved my brother dearly. They thought very highly of him. They respected him so much that they appointed him to be a youth leader. He was responsible for teaching that class of young people that used to bore him and me to death. Then they began asking him to preach. Moving back into the big house freed me from having to go to church every Saturday morning. But the few times Powell did speak, I attended. Each time, I was impressed, not so much by the things he was saying, as I was by the person who was saying it. I knew him privately, and he wasn't faking. All these changes that transpired in my brother's life were based on his decision to follow God. In his words, it's a relationship with God, not just coming to church. I had no idea what that meant. In his sermons, he talked about how understanding God's word was so important. I guess that's why he was reading it so much. He read a lot of different books by different authors, but the Bible was his favorite, along with a book called Desire of Ages. I remember his copy of that one because all the pages were highlighted with a yellow highlighter. Looking at it might lead you to believe he thought it was a coloring book. Not only did he read the Bible a lot, but he also prayed a lot. One night, I came home from the club. It had to be around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I was highly intoxicated from using marijuana and drinking beer and liquor. I went up to the window of the living room. I knew it was open because it was always unlocked. Always. I pushed the window up and then placed my hands firmly on the outer edge of the bricks. While holding the window up with one hand, I leapt like a frog into the living room. I tried to be as quiet as I could. I knew that the only ones who would be awake at this time were the rats in the kitchen, and I sure did not want to disturb them. I moved the curtain back, and there was a person. It scared the high out of me. It was Powell, on his knees, praying as he did regularly. This was the new Powell. His old perspectives about life had all been changed. It was as if they were burned in the fire. He was totally dedicated to living his life for God. Often, people would tell him that he was wise beyond his years. Many times, people thought he was the older brother when we were together. The fact that he was only a 15-year-old sophomore in high school, yet able to keep his focus in spite of the living conditions, was incredible. He possessed a strong focus on God and God's plan for his life. He learned how to deal with his frustrations in such a way that whatever happened to him, he could maintain his cool. The temptations to smoke, drink, have sex before marriage, lie, steal, you name it, they could not get him to fall back into his old life. I'm not saying he was perfect. I'm saying that he was the best example of an authentic Christian I had ever seen. As for me, I was still doing me. I was still trying to do my thing on the basketball court. I was still struggling to quit smoking during the basketball season. While Powell was busy living for God's plan for his life, I was busy living my life according to my plan. But my plan was not really working out the way I had imagined. My hoop dreams were fading away, like Michael Jordan with the Wizards. When you invest so much into something you love doing, it usually boosts your confidence in doing it. The more you practice, the greater your poise ought to be. At least, that's how it was for me with basketball. I believed that there was no other high school player on the planet that could stop me one-on-one. I was unguardable. I had proven this to my defenders at one park after another, one pickup game after another. I had also proved it to myself. There was no need to trash talk, just kill at will. They reach, I teach, hand down, man, down. When playing street ball, I had all the confidence in the world. I was a neighborhood superstar because of it. However, there was one problem I couldn't seem to shake. I couldn't make the transition. All of my practice and hard work to get better at the game did not always transfer when I played in my high school games. It was as if I was a different player. If anybody ever had basketball bipolar, it was me. I knew my abilities and what I could do, but it was hard to transfer it over to the hardwood from the blacktop. This frustrated my friends and my family who knew what I was capable of doing. More than anybody, it made me sick. I could drop 15 in a row in a pickup game and then go 1 for 10 in my high school game. It was as if I was destined to not make it to the league as a player. There may be several reasons why the transition from street basketball to organized basketball is challenging for many young hoopers to make. There are 2 in particular that I experienced: the green light and the fear of failure. They actually go hand in hand. The green light is an unofficial term used in the world of basketball. It describes a coach's confidence in the player. When a coach gives a player the green light, the player is able to play with an extra level of comfort. The green light is the signal to do your thing on the court. The green light says, be yourself. Do what you do. I trust you. I believe in you. It's okay to make a mistake out there. The bottom line of the green light is that the coach trusts you to score the ball, period. When a player has this, he can shine. If the coach is great and the player is average, with enough time and practice, the player can be great. But when a player does not have the green light, even though he or she may have all the potential in the world, it is difficult to be relaxed and play to your potential. It's one thing to believe in yourself, but I'm convinced that everyone needs someone to believe in them, to affirm them. This is not to say that a player cannot earn the green light, but it takes a special kind of courage. This courage involves taking a risk, overcoming the fear of failure. I think the words of Michael Jordan speaks to this point directly. MJ said, I can accept failure, but I can't accept not trying. For example, my high school coach was a simple guy in terms of his approach to basketball. He wasn't into flashy dribbling. I could handle the rock with flair. He wasn't into crossover moves, but my crossover was a critical part of my game. Basically, I allowed my coach to box me into his basketball ideals, when I should have taken the risk of playing how I played best in order to show him he could trust me and my style of play. And because I didn't take the risk, it frustrated me every day, especially during my senior year. I remember being so angry with myself, especially after a loss, when I knew I could have helped my team win. I knew my hoop dreams were vanishing, but I still had my hopes set on winning the state title during my last year of playing. We started the season 10-0. During this run, I had one of my best shooting games. I knocked down 5 3-pointers in one game. I had the green light, but momentarily. We were ranked number 3 in the state of Alabama. And then we got our first loss. A second one followed. Finally, we regrouped and got back into the groove of things. We started winning again and were amped for playoff time. Unfortunately, our first game of the playoffs was our last game of the season. We lost a great game to Tuscaloosa Central High that we should have won. This was one of the games where my teammates basically disappeared. I played my heart out. My teammates and coach rallied behind me. It was a flash of what I should have been doing all season. Again, I got the green light, but by now it was too late. My coach checked me out of the game with less than 30 seconds left to play. The buzzer sounded for substitutes to be made. I walked to the bench and received a standing ovation from fans, family, my coaches, and teammates. I plumped down in the chair on the bench, placed the white towel over my head, and cried like a baby. I hated losing. Losing that game was painful. But I also felt the loss of my dreams of playing basketball in the NBA. I did not put up the kind of numbers I knew I was capable of doing. Neither did I have the grades to qualify me for college. My score on the ACT was unworthy of mentioning since I slept through some of the test. Therefore, I did not have scouts from D1 schools begging me to come to their school. At the end of the basketball season, with no scholarship offers to play anywhere, I felt very disappointed. And the smoking started again. This time, it was like I had reverted back to my freshman year in high school when I smoked weed like I ate food, daily. Rather than participating in the senior activities following the breakfast held for the graduating seniors, 3 of my friends and I left immediately after eating to smoke 2 blunts, get drunk, and sit around joking about whatever came to mind. None of us had real plans for what we would do after high school. But I did know that I wanted to go to some community college. Actually, I had to, because I couldn't afford a 4-year school. Plus, my grades were poor. Family members and friends asked, "What's next, Taurus?" I might go to Faulkner State or Bishop State. I'm still not sure yet. Those are the 2 local community colleges that many of my classmates were planning to attend. It was kind of expected by many adults in Mobile that you go to one of the 2. So I just said that in order to avoid saying the truth, which was, I don't know. What I did know is that I wanted to get away. I was tired of my father. I was tired of the big house. I wanted to go away so that he could not be all up in my space all the time. I just didn't want to be around him. Although I didn't have any clear plans, it was clear that remaining in Mobile was not an option. The end of chapter 11 of Set on Fire by Taurus Montgomery.